Today I have with me Isabella Rittinger. She's the president of Bleed the North. It's a group based out of Ontario, which was founded this past year during the COVID pandemic because they noticed that there was a lot of stockpiling of menstrual products going on, which worsened the effects of period poverty. So we have her here today to chat with us a little bit about that journey. We're super excited because Bleed the North has donated over 35,000 products and helped over 1,800 Ontario menstruators in need. So super awesome to hear that this progress has been happening right here in Canada. And we're going to jump right into hearing her story about how things happened. So Isabella, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. As said, my name is Isabella Rittinger. I use she, her pronouns. I am an 18-year-old. I live just outside of Toronto, and I'm going into my second year at Queen's University.
Awesome. That's very cool. And what are you studying in school?
So I recently declared my major as political science and also decided to minor in film. So very exciting.
Very exciting. That's awesome. So right now we're just going to start with something a little bit lighthearted. I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple memes. And basically how this works is you have to rate it, your first reaction to it, and then whether you find it funny and whether you find it relatable.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go. What do you think of this one?
Okay, first of all, very funny, very relatable. I love a big Harry Styles fan, so I appreciate the reference. And that is very true. That's exactly the pose. That's pretty good. I love it. Definitely that one.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to show you one more. Give me 1 second. Okay, how about this one?
Yeah. That's a good one too. I think I've seen this one on like some Instagram or something before. This is definitely relatable. We all know the feeling. It's definitely uncomfortable. It's what the visual will look like when you feel it. So for sure.
Yeah, 100%. It's like when you're like crossing your legs and you're trying to like make it as nonchalant as possible.
It's so bad. Or when you stand up after like a long time. But that's, I guess, not if you're wearing a pad, not a tampon. But yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So to hear more about your story, how did you first become passionate about the issue of period poverty?
So the first time I ever learned about period poverty was in watching the documentary Period End of Sentence. I think it was pretty like widely acclaimed, won an Oscar and stuff. But if you haven't seen it, I think it's still available on Netflix. And it was definitely the first time I ever even heard of the term period poverty. And then after that, I delved into research more about how it manifests in Canada. And that's when I really started to become very passionate about the issue because prior to doing any sort of reading on that, I personally am privileged enough to not have been affected by period poverty before. But after doing more research, I realized just how prevalent it is in Canada. I naively and very incorrectly assumed that Canada was exempt from a lot of the issues regarding period poverty because, you know, we got rid of the pink tax. We have a quote unquote feminist prime minister, although you know, we have our own concerns about that. But all to say, like, I was naive to assume that it was not an issue here. So in doing more research about how it exists in Canada and how prevalent it is, I knew that I needed to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that it came down to the piece of like understanding the actual current state of things because I think like information is like the first part to any movement, right? And getting involved with anything. So that's
Absolutely.
awesome. And so from that awareness piece, how did you transition from that to actually launching Bleed the North? Like, what was the journey between, okay, now you see that this is a real issue here in Canada. How did you go from that to actually acting on a solution?
Okay, so there are two components to this. The first is, as you said, Bleed the North was started last March, and so it was the onset of the pandemic. Period products were being stockpiled, and also I knew after having done all this research about period poverty in Canada that like if it was that bad before, can you imagine what it's going to be like now that who knows what's happening with this whole COVID thing at the time,
Mhm.
right? And so that coupled with the fact that I had been sent home from school, I was in grade 12 at the time. And I was like, I have nothing else to do. This is the perfect opportunity to do something that I'm passionate about. I have all this free time. And so that was kind of all of the components that led to me starting Bleed the North. Bleed the North, what is Bleed the North now was actually originally a chapter of the period movement.
Mhm.
We were the region chapter, and so we operated technically under another organization up until June, because we felt that the values of the period movement did not align with the values of our organization, and we wanted to become our own thing and be able to actually like perform on the values that we hold dear to our hearts. So we decided to leave the period movement and become Bleed the North and all of what it is today. And so I think so much of what Bleed the North is now and how I went from that, okay, learning about the issue to actually trying to tangibly enact change was one because of COVID and because of all of the, as I said, like pressures on the economy and things like that in my spare time. But then two, because we wanted to demand more for ourselves in leaving the period movement and becoming our own organization. And I think that Bleed the North does a really good job of kind of like striking while we're hot and not being afraid to take risks, even if it means leaving a huge organization to start on our own. Because in the end, that's probably the best thing we could have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear that journey because everyone kind of starts things differently. And it must have taken like a very mature understanding in order for you guys to figure out that it was time to strike out on your own and actually make sure that everything that you were working on was in alignment with your core values. So
Yeah,
that's
it was
awesome.
scary, but it was scary. But honestly, as I say, like looking back, it was the best decision we could have made, and the whole team was super on board and excited about it. And so, looking back, it's one of the best things we've done.
Mhm. Yeah. And so moving on from that beginning phase, what has been the response to the initiatives that you've created so far?
Honestly, overwhelming. I started Bleed the North expecting it to be like a 2 to 3 week project. I thought, okay, we have an extended March break. I'm just gonna fill my time with this and try and do as much as I can, help as many folks as I can before I go back to school and then eventually start university and whatever, and have this just be something, a small like passion project that I would be working on over the course of a few weeks. And that's what it was at the beginning. It was like super small. It was really just my mom and I driving around the area that we live, picking up products and dropping them off. But as the pandemic worsened and as more people heard about what we were doing, more people wanted to get involved and more people were really supportive. And so pretty quickly we grew out of Durham region, which is where we were first operating, to become Period Ontario at that time. So I can honestly say that the response has been completely overwhelming and remarkable. I think that a lot of people haven't heard about this issue. Period poverty isn't necessarily something that's often talked about within the social justice realm and outside of it. And so a lot of people were really excited to be able to participate in something that not many people are aware is an issue, because that makes it even more important to solve. And I think that also a lot of people were looking for something to do, especially in the first months of lockdown. Like we didn't have, there was nothing to do, you know what I mean? And people felt like they needed to participate in something and wanted to give back if they had the privilege of having the time to do so. And so we provided that opportunity to people. It's like you can make the period packs from home, you can support Bleed the North, a local charity, and give back during this huge time of need. So people were really eager to support us.
That's amazing. I think, yeah, when hearing that whole journey, it makes me so happy that there are people who truly care about this. They see that menstrual equity is a huge thing that they can not only participate in tangibly, but then also be like contributing to this larger movement of changing the landscape of period equity, menstrual equity in Canada.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when all of this was beginning, what were some of the challenges that you faced to start up Bleed the North?
Well, the largest one would have to be COVID. It was definitely bold of me to decide to start an organization that was so reliant on like in-person delivery and contact. Like
Mhm.
the first thing was, okay, I've decided that this is something I want to do. Now, how in the world am I going to collect period products from like volunteers, put them into packs, and then donate them to people who need them? Like, it's not something that can be, it's not something that you can do remotely. And so it was a blessing and a curse because we went into it at the very beginning, and so it was at that time that everybody was trying to like pivot. We didn't
Mhm.
need to pivot. We started out like trying to think of innovative ways to go about servicing our communities in covid friendly forms. A lot of other menstrual organizations needed to like pause and figure out how they were going to continue operating under this new guidelines or whatever. But we didn't need to because we just started out like that. So I think that while it was a challenge, we adapted really quickly because we didn't need to like change anything. We started out like that. And so really early on, it was like, okay, contactless pickup. Drive-by drives is another thing we do, where we set up in a parking lot and have people like drop off period products in their car, like as if we're a drive-through. So it's been kind of fun almost trying to figure out COVID friendly ways to operate, and be innovative in that sense.
Yeah, and I can imagine how collaborative this aspect is that um, you've built such a community around Bleed the North, so people actually feel like when they're organizing all of these things with you and doing the logistics, that it's kind of fun. Like it must be enjoyable to actually see that, yeah, I'm donating these products or I'm helping coordinate the donations, and it's actually going to something bigger.
Yes, well, I appreciate you saying that thing about community because that's always what we've strived to accomplish. And I do hope it's fun. I do hope that people get some other than the obvious, which is supporting the community and helping solve this really, really dark issue.
Mhm.
Also, like the friendships that we've made have been amazing. So
Mhm. Yeah, that's incredible. I also wanted to ask, so when I was looking at your social media pages, one thing that I noted, and also in the beginning of the call when you shared your pronouns, I noted that your group is super inclusive of people from different communities. So I'm wondering where or how do you think about inclusivity when it comes to periods in general?
So I think that for a long time in the menstrual justice space, it's been, first of all, it's a fairly new development to try and shift from using feminine hygiene products to just
Mhm.
period products, or not using the term woman, using the term menstruator. But I think that for too long it's been considered like an add-on for organizations to do, and it needs to be, it really is like the core of the issues of period poverty and period stigma, are learning about how intersectionality and diversity and inclusion like interact with the issue. For Menstrual Hygiene Day, we did our event specifically on intersectionality in the menstrual justice realm because I think for so long menstruation and conversations about period poverty and stigma have been centering white cis women,
Mhm.
and that is just not a fair representation of the people who are most impacted by period poverty and period stigma. So like, yes, it is so important to be mindful of language and to use the term menstruator instead of women, because not all women menstruate and not all menstruators are women. But
Mhm.
making sure that all of your practices like center these individuals. And if you're a menstrual justice organization and work towards advocacy, it's like not only including them but highlighting them, sharing their stories, because in the end the people who are most impacted by period poverty and are facing so many more like dangers with their menstruation are trans, non-binary individuals, people of color, indigenous communities. And so those are the people that need not only to be added into the conversation, but highlighted in it. And that's kind of what we really try and focus on in Bleed the North, because we're a young organization, we are pretty new, but we're also really diverse. And I think that allows us to come with a new lens that a lot of others don't necessarily have. And so that's why we really want to prioritize all of them.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that, right? Like using the platform that you have to highlight voices that may be underrepresented and not heard as often.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. One thing I also wanted to ask was just on your own side of things, how would you describe your, if you menstruate, how would you describe your period care routine? Or do you have any like tips or life hacks to share about period care?
So I feel that as much as I am like in the menstrual justice space and still learning, there's a lot that I've learned even from coming into this space. So first of all, in terms of like my menstruation specifically, I wasn't sure if I had PCOS for like a really long time because I wasn't menstruating for like a few years. And then just recently my period like naturally came back. And so I've always had like a pretty interesting relationship with my period, because starting Bleed the North last March, I wasn't menstruating. And so there was a part of it like feeling like an imposter, where it's like I'm servicing these people and I'm talking about periods so much, but I myself am not even menstruating. And it's since come back. And I think that menstruation was something that I kind of like dreaded before I lost my period. But now that it's come back, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't know why it came back. I don't know anything about what's going on down there, but now that it's come back, I have much more appreciation for it, because it's not just bleeding. Like there's so many other aspects that go along with having a menstrual cycle that it's something that I should be proud of and try and take care of. I was just using like regular old products, like scented products, usually like Tampax and Always. And so since I've gotten my period back, and I would say it's still like, it's pretty new. So I'm trying to shift into more sustainable products, which is why companies like Ruth are so incredible, because for too long, we have like the menstrual space has been dominated by these huge corporations that don't value individual menstruators' health and don't value the environment. And so along with advocating for period poverty and period stigma, against period poverty and period stigma, it's also advocating for like more sustainable solutions. And I am working now to incorporate that into my own menstruation, like as much as possible. Obviously, there's so many barriers to that, like financial barriers and locations and things like that. But I think the more companies like Ruth or the bigger Ruth gets, the better for individual menstruators. So I hope that I can incorporate that more into my period as I get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for being so transparent and vulnerable with that. Because I know that like as much as people who are in the period equity space and we want to share things like reducing the stigma of menstruation, sometimes it's a personal story to share. So thank you for that. I really appreciate you being vulnerable there. And yeah, like one thing I wanted to just ask you is, what is your vision for the future of Bleed the North? Like, what do you see if you could dream super big, what is like the long-term goal?
Well, I want Bleed the North to be first of all, right now, as you said, we are only operating in Ontario. I'd love to go national, and I'd love for Bleed the North to be a space for all menstruators and non in Canada, for people to like participate in conversations about period poverty and period stigma and be able to service as many people as possible. As you said, we've been able to collect 35,000 or donate 35,000 period products, and I'm so amazed by our service team, and I never anticipated numbers like that, but I would love to be able to address period poverty and period stigma on a national level and be able to eventually have it be an organization that is able to fulfill the needs of all menstruators, everyone who can't access period products. So that is like the service component. I definitely want Bleed the North to be able to fill the gaps where it's needed across the country, but then also continue advocating on a federal level for free period products in Canada. Because we've seen countries like Scotland and New Zealand make the legislative change. And I think that Canada can and should be doing that already at this point 5 years ago. So in growing, I want to also grow our advocacy to try and eventually get free period products on a national level.
Yeah, that's awesome. We love to hear it. And I'm so excited for you to make all of those goals come true, because I truly see like Canada as well on a federal level being able to provide that as a necessary product to all of our citizens, all the people in our country who menstruate and need the products. So I love that. And last thing is there anything else I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
I think just if you are listening to this and wanting to get involved in menstrual activism or wanting to learn more about period poverty and period stigma, like say this is one of the first times you've ever heard of these issues, I really encourage people to get involved. And menstrual activism does not only look like me, like it doesn't need to be starting an organization, or it doesn't need to be participating in an organization. It's also like having conversations with your family. If you have a sibling that doesn't menstruate, sharing your experience, sharing what you've learned by listening or watching these videos. Switching from a regular pad or tampon to a sustainably made pad like Ruth's. Also, I guess just continuing to learn and continuing to end the stigma by talking about this with your peers and trying to advocate for free period products in your schools. If you are a high school student, if you're young and you want to get involved, that's a really good way to go about it. Talk to your teacher about putting a supply of period products in their classroom. Like there's so many ways to get involved and address these issues that isn't just participating in a grassroots organization, because the thing about period poverty and period stigma is it is such an interpersonal issue that there's so much that you can do on an individual scale. And so I think if you want to get involved, those are some really great ways to go about it. And I definitely encourage everybody to, if you're interested in the things that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Isabella. Those are like some real practical, tangible ways that people can actually help and get involved. So just to close things off, our Ruth sustainable and disposable pads are launching through a crowdfunding campaign in a few weeks, and we're offering discounts to people who sign up on our VIP list right now. So you can do that by signing up on our website at getruth.ca, or there's a link in our Instagram bio, which is also at getruth.ca, and you can follow along for more period memes and also product updates.